Hello guys, my name is Luv-kirat, and today we are going to talk about Netflix documentary movie called 13th. In this movie, we see that how black people were discriminated and faced inequality by the white people after the end of slavery system and civil war in 1865. The movie also highlights the conflict theory between rich and poor. All of these aspects of criminology will be discussed. There were several rights that were not given to the black people, like their children cannot go to school, and they were not allowed to vote. They were not allowed to visit in a public places where usually white people visit with their families, and that was very hard situation for black people to survive in the conditions because they just got out from the slavery system, and the next challenge of their life was also started on the same time. And we are also going to talk about how this movie highlights or depicts the conflict theory between rich and poor and the racial discrimination against black people and the Latin people by the white people. Once the civil war and the slavery system was over, the African American people were freely allowed to go anywhere, like they can go anywhere, they can do anything. But that wasn't actually a freedom, because immediately after this decision was made, the majority of African American people got arrested just because of their minor crimes. They, they didn't even did any major crimes, and most of them were sentenced to the full life of imprisonment, and that was the harsh decision by the government of America just because of their race. Just because of their race and their color, they were discriminated that much, and they were considered as the second class citizens ever since from then. But nowadays this perception is not quite true, but on that time it was happened, and that was a very cruel time for the whole community. And the dark days were just getting started because the new act was launched by the president of that time, which was the war on drugs. Under this act, the government wanted to reduce the usage of drugs and the supply of drugs in the society, but that wasn't because they just wanted a reason to arrest black people as many as they can, because they were doing genocide to these people, and that was very harsh reality of that time, as they thrown hundreds of thousands of black people into the jail in small amount of time, and associating them with the drug abuse as well. And they raid their homes, arrest their families, arrest their leaders, and showing them in the news night after night to defaming them. Then Ronald Reagan was elected as a president in 1980s, and he took the war on drugs on to the next level. Like, there used to be a drug named crack, and if the white person is found if the white person is found carrying that drug, he wasn't sentenced as much as the black people or the Latin or Hispanic people were sentenced. Like, if if it is a person from between both three of these communities, it is most likely that he would get sentenced to his entire life in the prison. But on the other hand, if it's a white male people or white female, they weren't got much punishment. War on drug was basically a war on some races like black and Latin people. And you can imagine that how much racial discrimination used to happen on that period. And this was one of the major reasons that so many crimes were used to happen on that time, because people were generally get racially discriminated as they were considered as, and This was one of the major reasons that a lot of crimes were happening on that time. Over half of million population of America was in jail or in prison on that time, and black people were generally overrepresented in the criminal activities. That was the toughest time in the black community. And if you think about that, the slavery system was ended so long ago. I think this is not the case, because this is not completely true, as there is a private prison called ACC. It is the first private prison in USA, and they share their prisoners to multi-billion industries like JC Penney, Microsoft, and lots of other big organization as a labor. And he also forced them, their prisoners, to grow vegetables like potatoes. The potatoes are all planted and grown and shipped inside the prisons and by the inmates. And private prisoners and corporations are operating from prisoners and profiting from their punishments. Like, they are taking very huge advantage of their punishment, as doesn't matter if they commit any crime or not. If they are inside the prison, they are making huge amount of money by using them as slaves. So the prison industry is becoming bigger and bigger over time, and it is a new way to generate the slaves, as we always think that 1865 was the last year in which the prison system used to be in our society, but it's still going nowhere. It is still present in our society, but in the invisible form that the general public cannot even imagine. Now let's talk about the conflict theory. There is a story of a boy named Calf Browder. One day he was going down to his home with his friends, and the police suddenly stopped him and took him to the police station and charged him with a criminal offense. The criminal offense that he never committed. He explained the police that he never did any sort of criminal activities, not today, not any other day. But the police said that if you didn't commit any crime, we will likely send you to the home, back to the home. But the day was never came, and the police uh, demanded $10,000. But his family and him could not ever afford this amount of money. They were not very rich, and so he was sent in the prison for almost 5 years. Through that period, he was engaged in several fights with the inmates, and sometimes the cops were also used to attack him. His life was become so hard in the prison, like tried to commit crime several times in the prison, but was failed each time. So it was the violation of human rights, that the crime that he never committed but still got the punishment. And there are several people that are in prison right now that never committed any crime but still facing injustice. And the boy, after his release from the prison, 2 years after his release from prison, he was found hung in his house in Bronx, and that was really heartbreaking, because the poor boy never committed any sort of crime or criminal activity in his entire life, but still had to go through this phase in his life. Like, he just ended his entire life, 22 years old, and he had his entire career ahead. He could do anything, he could become anything he ever dreamed of becoming, but the injustice that he faced took away everything from him. That if he had the money, he could easily get out from that prison, but he was poor. His only mistake was that he was poor. He cannot afford this much amount of money to get him released from the prison. But if there was a rich person on his place, if he even committed any crime, he could easily get out from the prison because he would have all his money, all his luxurious life that he could easily afford anything. This is the difference between rich and the poor people of the society. Doesn't matter if the rich person commit any sort of crime, he would easily get out from the prison, would never get any sentenced of imprisonment. But on the other hand, poor all the prisoners, all the prisons and all the penalties are only for the poor people of the society. Experts calls the prison beast that have eaten poor Latino and the black people of the society. It is a beast that do not mercy on some type of races, and over 30% of black population have already lost their rights to vote in Alabama. It is only because there was always an equality between black and white people. So all of these inequalities create an environment in which we can see lots of crimes happening day to day, and it is very important to overcome these situations, because if it is keep on going this, the criminal activities will also be rising day by day.